I live here, and why do we all live here? I mean, I find it crazy. This is the most stunning country you could have anywhere on earth. And there's only 750,000 people. And we're all mixed, and we're all of different ethnicities, and we should all get on and just build this amazing place. Because we don't have to.
Hi there, Carl Browne here with you. Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and let's take a trip again down my time tunnel. Hi, welcome back to my time tunnel, and it's good to be with you. But today, let's look at the literary side of things. Yes, you know what I mean? Reading books. And Edgar Mittelholzer's Creole Chips. It's done by and edited by Juanita Cox. But the thing is, Cox Westmus. But who is Edgar Mittelholzer? All I recall of Edgar Mittelholzer was hearing the narration of his works by James Sidney, Uncle James in those days. And he did a production called My Bones and My Flute. And that was a bit eerie because even though I was working then with the Radio Demerara before GBC, and I heard it, I never listened because I was scared. I thought it had to do something with bones and flute and a dead man's tale. But I think there's more. There was lots more about that. And when Juanita Cox brought this up, the Creole Chips, it was fascinating to see that. Great. Here's another writer. Here's somebody who has got short fictions, poetry, drama, and essays. I'll tell you more about that. Listen up.
Hi, I'm Juanita Cox, and I'm one of the co-founders of Guyana Speaks. I think Carl has just asked me to highlight this book, which is called Creole Chips and Other Writings. It's a compendium of short stories, short fiction, some poetry, some drama plays, and also personal writings, all by Edgar Mittelholzer. The whole compendium took around 10 years to actually pull together. Reason being that a lot of the material in here is material that was previously unpublished, and it was material that was held in people's personal collections at home. So, for example, Edgar Mittelholzer used to write to a lady called Ruth Wilkinson, and in the 1940s, when he moved to Trinidad, so Ruth Wilkinson was still living in Guyana, he was in Trinidad, he wrote to her describing what his life was like in Trinidad, but he would also write poetry, so he wrote a poem called Dove of Gasperies, just things that kind of depicted the Trinidad landscape, and that lady kept all of that material, over about 100 bits of correspondence between her and Edgar in her private collection. And through my research on, I was actually doing a PhD on his novels, but in the process of that research I met her and heard all about that, and therefore wanted to produce this compendium. It's also made up of short stories that he wrote for newspapers like the Daily Chronicle or the Argosy. So one of the great things, for example, in this collection that I really love, and I'll just show you very quickly, Creole Chips was pulled together in about 1937, and they're really short pieces of little short stories. You know, they're complete in and of themselves, and it's a very different side of Edgar that you see here because he's publishing it for the local market. So essentially when he's writing books that are being published in Britain and America, he's having to sort of use language that, you know, the Western audience can read and understand. But in Creole Chips, you find there's a lot of Creole that's used. So here we have a discussion between two gentlemen who are on a bus called the Sweet Muchacha. And it's a bus that came to a stop at the corner of Lamaha and Cumming Street. And Bill is a stevedore, and Jim is a shovel man. And they're having a conversation about the movies. And you know, in Guyana in the 1930s, movies were a central part of Guyanese entertainment. And so they're talking about the movie Norma Shearer was in. And she was in something called The Barretts of Wimpole Street. And they're arguing about whether she was better than Katharine Hepburn was in Morning Glory. And meanwhile, there's a bus conductor trying to get paid for the fare. And then, you know, Bill goes, but what's wrong with you? You think we're not going to pay you? You know, so there's this whole conversation that's in the, that's in Creole, and it's just, you just don't get that in any of his novels. So it's one of the reasons I really liked these early pieces. But also it's because I have a sort of interest in history, and particularly in the history of Guyana. And one of the great things about Mittelholzer is he pays a lot of attention to detail. And he uses real detail, you know, so although it's fiction, the setting is very real. And if you pay attention to the descriptions in the stories, you get a very strong sense of what Guyana was like at the time. So of course here you've got the bus called Sweet Muchacha. And I don't know if any of you know of the song. There's a song called The Sweet Muchacha that was very popular in the 1930s. And because we now have the internet, you can just go on into YouTube and you can Google Sweet Muchacha, and then suddenly you hear the band playing and it's this sort of Latin tune, and you're literally transformed there along with this story. And you can look up the films, you know, about Katharine Hepburn and Morning Glory and Norma and all of that kind of thing. And you get a real sense of what Guyana was like at the time. But the important thing is that even those are sort of outside influences on Guyana, you get a sense of what Guyana itself was like. So you've got this wonderful bus, and you've got the stevedore, and you've got the shovel man, and then you've got this fabulous Creole. And then also one of the things that Edgar did was during, he noticed that a lot of the colored middle class, as they were called in those days, had prejudice against different groups, and one of those groups was the Indo-Guyanese community, where the colored middle class used to think they were a bit more superior and they used to look down on them. And Edgar was very pioneering in the sense that he realized this was a whole lot of nonsense, you know, and he had I'm trying to remember the name of the big legal family, Indo-Guyanese family, lived next door to him. His best friend was Lionel Loku, so it was the Loku family that were next door to them. And they used to take him on trips to the quarantine, and he developed this amazing love of the quarantine. So you'll see in his first novel, Quarantine Thunder, is really a kind of dedication to the Indo-Guyanese community, because it was through them, through the Loku family, that he learned a lot more about the Indo-Guyanese, and he learned that a lot of the stereotypes were nonsense. So here we have in the first Creole Chip is actually interaction between the Afro-Guyanese community and the Indo-Guyanese community. So Bill and Jim, these two characters, when they're on the bus conductor is asking them to pay the fare. And then they're suddenly, when they're saying, "What wrong with you?" They think it's because he's an Indo-Guyanese person. You know, they're always after money. So Bill then is talking about, "Well, me meet money shark in this world, but this beat all string band," you know, because he's like, why is this man chasing us for money already? You know, so what Mittelholzer wanted to do was to challenge these stereotypes, because he's showing that these two men are complaining about a bus conductor asking for the fare based on his ethnicity. But yet still, it's not the bus conductor that comes across as looking silly in this clip. It's actually the two men, because you're on a bus, you should pay your fare, right? So he's very clever in the way he uses literature as a way of challenging and trying to actually transcend the kind of racial divisions within Guyanese society. So yeah, that's really why I'm very passionate about the writings of Edgar Mittelholzer, and I'd really highly recommend it. There's maybe even, for example, some of the poems that are in here, they may not be the best poems in the world. Some are brilliant, some are not. They weren't necessarily aimed for publication, but they're really fascinating because, again, for example, he was writing the poems during the period of the war, so in the 1940s, sort of from 41 to 45. And there were Guyanese all over the world during that period, and one of them was called Snake Hip Johnson. And I don't know if you've heard of him, but he was very popular in Britain at the time. He used to play at a music hall called Café de Paris, and that in Oxford Street, and it got blown up. And Edgar wrote a poem as a kind of elegy to his loss. But clearly what that piece of poetry tells us was how much it meant to Edgar. He realized if you were Guyanese, you could use art and culture as a way of getting known across the world and putting Guyana on the map. Because, you know, in that period, because Snake Hip Johnson had been very popular. For a short moment in time, everybody knew where Guyana was, and the same thing actually happens with Edgar Mittelholzer when he writes the Guyana trilogies, and it's through the Guyana trilogies that we find in the United States around about the same time in the 50s, mid-50s, that people said Guyana, oh yeah, Guyana trilogies, yes, that's that place in South America. So he understood fully how important it was to embrace art and writing, and music, whatever form of art you are talented at, to use that as a way of putting Guyana on the map and promoting it. So he's just somebody that I'm very passionate about, because I realized what an amazing pioneer he was.
I mean, it's amazing. What really intrigued you so much about Guyana, being a non-Guyanese?
I really don't know. I think I must have lived another life and just been Guyanese in it. It's very difficult for me to say. I think really I came to Guyana through the writing of Edgar Mittelholzer. So the first book I ever read about Guyana was a book written by him called The Life and Death of Sylvia, and it's set in Georgetown. And when you read the book, all you can hear is kiss, 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 kiddy. And you can hear all the sounds of Georgetown. You know what Georgetown's like, is a cacophony of sounds and these tropical sounds, and it was so alluring. I had to go to Guyana. So that was really what got me on the journey to find Guyana in the first place. So I went to Guyana not knowing, anybody that was Guyanese, and I did the research on Edgar Mittelholzer through that. But when I got there, the welcome I got from Guyanese people was amazing. I felt totally embraced. And rather than people asking me where I came from, they would ask me, which part of Guyana you're from? And I'd be like, what do you mean, which part of Guyana? I'm not from Guyana. Oh man, then they'd be like, okay, so you're living in England now, so you think you're too high and something to say where in Guyana you're from, right? So now I just, I've been to Guyana every year since about 2006. In fact, my husband and I then lived. My husband is a Westmus, and his family had a place in the Pomeroon. So we went to live in the Pomeroon I lived there for about a year. He was there for 2 years. And of course, my love for Guyana has just got deeper and deeper and stronger, because the landscape of Guyana is, I can't explain to you. It's like a religious experience for me. It really is. It's so stunning, so beautiful that I love it. So I love the people, I love the art, I love the literature, I love the landscape. I mean, I can't be anywhere else. And on top of that, as someone who's mixed race, my background is I'm English, half Ghanaian. Yes, I know, I'm from Ghana. Okay, so that joke between Guyana and Ghana always kind of amuses me, because, obviously I'm Ghanaian. But I've never really felt at home in Ghana, mainly because I don't speak the language, but I've never felt at home there. And when I do visit, people ask me, which part of the Caribbean are you from? And then when I'm in England, it's the same thing. People will never sort of accept you as being English. It's always like, where do you originate from? So the idea of going to Guyana and then people arguing with me that I must be Guyanese, but which part of Guyana it is. So now I just say I'm from the Pomeroon, and I'm an honorary Guyanese. So.
How can we get our hands on the book if people would like to? I mean, how can they, what info do you have about the achievements?
Okay. So the book is available via People Tree Press, and I should say it's not people as in humans, it's people as in Peepal, People Tree Press. www.peopletreepress.com, and you just put in Mittelholzer, this book will come up. Another book will also come up. It's called In the Eye of the Storm, and that's an anthology of writings about Mittelholzer's work, and that's coming out round about the end of April, beginning of May. So there's two. So we're really trying to bring Mittelholzer to the fore and get people reading his works again and just learning more about him and his achievements.
Juanita, it's a pleasure talking with you. Absolutely wonderful.
Okay, thank you so much, Carl, as usual. That's brilliant. Thank you.